Hey there, Christian caregivers. I hope that this week has been fruitful for you and your teen. I pray that when you shared Romans 12:2 with them, that they realize that they don't have to copy the behaviors and customs of this world to know, to feel good, that they can allow God to show them those things, those healthy things that really fill them up. So today I want to share a little bit more about my personal story regarding the power of things. And I want your teen to understand how slippery the slope is, that it can happen to anyone, and that it doesn't happen overnight. It's very much like that song from Casting Crowns, Slow Fade. Before they even realize it, they'll find themselves in a really dark place if they don't understand and respect the power of things. So even though I was in Just Say No in elementary school, I hated the smell of my grandparents' secondhand smoke, and I was an overachiever in school. I knew that I wanted to be a doctor, and I had my stuff together. By the time I was in middle school, I really started to get that invincibility itch, to romance that rebel lifestyle of breaking the rules and being cool and fitting in. And I remember in middle school huffing rubber cement down in the basement with one of my girlfriends. And then we snuck out of the house and ran around the neighborhood acting like fools. I remember sneaking wine out of a box in the fridge at another girlfriend's house. And by the time I was a freshman, I was sneaking across the street to smoke cigarettes before my high school show choir rehearsal. Why those two I thought went together, I do not know. You can see that my thinking was not exactly healthy. I'm getting ready to go sing and dance at the same time, but before that, let's go across the street and sneak behind a house and smoke a cigarette. Not wise. My sophomore year, I was really drinking and smoking regularly by that point, and I started using marijuana. I also started engaging in sexual activity, and I shared with you before, my junior year was really a turning point for me because I started hanging out with people who were a lot older than me, unbeknownst to my parents. And so I had really easy access then to the alcohol and the cigarettes, but I also had access to street drugs, and not just marijuana. I had access to cocaine, to LSD, to crystal meth, and those drugs in combination with the alcohol were really harmful. And it was at that point that I was sexually assaulted for the first time. I literally blacked out and then came to with this man on top of me. And here I am as a minor. That is an image in my mind that I will never be able to erase. And I was scared to tell my parents or another trusted adult because A, I'd been using drugs, and B, I was not where I told my parents that I was going to be. And it turns out that not sharing that with a trusted adult was one of the worst decisions that I could have made because I carried around that guilt and shame all alone for a long time. And I'm confident that that guilt and shame led to more toxic behavior. I used drugs and alcohol and cigarettes almost on a daily basis until I became pregnant with my son at the age of 20. And I was fortunately wise enough to make healthier choices during my pregnancy. But as soon as I had DeAndre, I started using the alcohol and cigarettes and drugs again. And I did so until I graduated from nursing school at the age of 25. I knew then that I was going to be drug tested regularly as a hospital employee, so I gave up the drugs and just kept on binge drinking and smoking. And I was fortunate, I guess, enough you could say, that I was a high achiever at work as well, despite my binge drinking. By the time I was 30, I received my first promotion into management. And this was another key moment in my life, because up until that point, I had only negative coping mechanisms to deal with the stress. And so when the stress of management got really tough, I was in charge of a 30-bed unit that was open 24/7, 365, and I had 63 associates who were reporting to me. I turned to my thing. I turned to the alcohol, and now I wasn't just binge drinking on the weekends, I was drinking daily. And I can remember, as my drinking got worse, my son begging me to stop drinking. And I started bargaining with him and with myself and with God, and saying things like, well, I'll only drink on the weekends, or I'll only drink wine, right? Because that's what ladies drink. They drink wine. So I'll give up the hard liquor or the 12-pack of beer that I was drinking every night, sometimes more. But it turns out that I broke all of those promises too. I was a sorry wife, and I was a sorry mother. And I ended up divorced with 3 children in a broken home, something I swore I would never do. On September 13th, 2014, I took my last drink. I recommitted my life to Christ. I started seeing a drug and alcohol counselor, and I got involved in a 12-step program. And through a lot of hard work, and by the grace of God, I have completely turned my life around. But I have lasting consequences that I can't undo because of the harmful things I chose to participate in. So what's the take-home message for your teen? 1, I firmly believe that engaging in one harmful thing, choosing to do that once, can lead you down a slippery slope. Today, recreational marijuana use is becoming more and more popular. It's been legalized in several of our states in America. And while there are plenty of people who argue that it isn't a gateway drug, my personal experience says otherwise. I was scared to try marijuana. I remember it, where I was, what I was doing, who was with me, but my boyfriend urged me to do it, and I caved to that peer pressure. And when I didn't experience any devastating effects the first time, it became easier the next time. And then when more harmful drugs came along, I had that same mindset. Oh, it's just for fun, I'll be fine. And it turns out, as you've learned while listening, it wasn't fine. The second thing that I want your teens to take away from this is to ask themselves this question: does alcoholism or addiction run in my family? Because if it does, you need to flee from all chemical substances, because it can happen to you too, more easily than other people who don't have that in their family history. Both of my mother's parents were alcoholics. I knew that. I hated their lifestyle when I was younger, but I chose to ignore that when I became a teenager, and I got that invincibility itch, that itch to break the rules and to feel cool and to fit in. And look where it led me. And then finally, let me back up for a second, because this is important to me. So when you think about an alcoholic, because this is why I had a really hard time accepting the fact that I was an alcoholic. I thought about the homeless man under the bridge, but an alcoholic can be anyone. So when you think of an alcoholic, I want you to think about me. I want you to see me. I was completely powerless over alcohol. Once I had that first drink, I couldn't stop. And even though I was functioning and had a good job and paid my mortgage and owned 2 vehicles, I was powerless over alcohol, and it completely devastated my family. So when you think of an alcoholic, remember that it can happen to anyone, and I want you to think about me. Then finally, my third take-home point today is, if you would have told me that night that I huffed rubber cement in the 7th grade that I was gonna end up dropping out of college my sophomore year to binge on drugs and alcohol at 2-day raves, I would have told you that you had lost your mind. You were crazy. I would never do something like that. I was gonna go to college. I was gonna go to medical school. I was gonna become a doctor and be successful and have an amazing career. Never would have believed you. But that's how the devil gets us. He's tricky. He's slow and methodical with his temptations. So remember, it only takes one bad choice to start to make another one. And then it gets easier every time to continue to make those poor choices until you find yourself in a really dark place. And that is not what I want for you. I want you to learn from my mistakes, from my story, and remember Romans 12:2. You don't have to copy the behavior and customs of this world, but instead allow God to change your thinking. He will show you what is good and pleasing and perfect. And that's what our hearts, our souls, our minds truly desire. So I pray that when it comes to things, you'll look at and understand there are so many good things that God has created for us to enjoy. We don't have to engage in those harmful things. I hope that you all have a very good weekend and that this was a blessing to you and your family.